My name is Devin Breeden, and you are joining me for Lessons Learned from the 2008 Recession for Business 626 with Dr. Isabel Juan. The goal of this presentation is to cover multiple objectives. The first objective is what caused the recession of 2008? The second being, how did the United States adapt following the recession? Third, is there a risk for another recession? And lastly, what economic advice can help prevent a future recession? Summary of the 2008 recession. The 2008 recession, also known as the Great Recession, happened to be one of the worst economic downturns since the Great Depression, resulting in excess unemployment, increased home foreclosures, and a need for the United States to rebuild. It also affected many countries throughout the world. It was a direct result of a booming housing market, expansionary fiscal policies, and the overuse of subprime loans. We'll continue to dive into two different causes of the 2008 Great Depression. The first cause is the housing bubble. Up until 2008, we saw an increase in home prices in the United States until there was an excess of home inventory. To offset the high inventory, the value of homes began to decrease to help increase the need for homes. Banks began providing many different loans to those who could not afford them. As a result of loans being given to those who could not afford them, many people foreclosed and the home prices continued to dive down. The second cause of the 2008 recession is the use of predatory loans. Banks utilized subprime loan mortgages that allowed loans to those with poor credit. This allowed more of the middle to lower income individuals purchase a home that may have been at a value that was higher than what they could afford. The use of subprime loans allowed many banks to bypass a lot of the safety that was included more and more of a conventional loan. As the housing market continued to boom over the years prior to 2008, the banks had to find a way to be less restrictive in terms of how they were going to approve the loans. Therefore, the use of subprime loans began to increase up to almost 50% of the loans utilized within the United States. Many banks acquired these risky mortgages in the form of mortgage-backed securities. In analyzing the 2008 recession, it's important to look at fiscal policies that may have resulted in the downturn of the economy. One of the fiscal policies was the push of the Housing and Urban Development to increase mortgage availability to low-income groups, resulting in the need to use subprime loans. These subprime loans bypass most of the security found in more of the conventional loans, as mentioned before. The United States began to see that many of these subprime loans had led to a higher than normal default on them. Therefore, the push to expand the option for people to afford homes backfired on the United States. The second concern that resulted in the recession was that in June of 2003, the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates near 1%, and over the next few years began raising interest rates. Initially, the low interest rates drove up the demand of homes and the value of the homes. But as people began to see the Federal Reserve's increase in interest began putting people in a situation where they could not afford their payments on their homes, resulting in additional defaults. So what was the effect of the recession of 2008? First, they began to see homes being foreclosed. As homes became foreclosed and people could not pay back their mortgages, the value of homes plummeted. And as a result, additional people could not afford to make the payments on their home loans. Many banks felt the pressure to maintain their function, but most lost the battle, resulting in the closing of over 450 institutions. The second effect of the recession is that many businesses had failed without access to business loans. This also had a direct effect on the employment of the individuals working for those companies as we started seeing increases in unemployment. Industries that depended on home building and sales suffered significantly to maintain revenues, as most people were not searching for homes and most people were trying to get away from purchasing them altogether. A culmination of all of this led to the stock market crashing in the United States due to foreclosures, business closings, and unemployment, ultimately resulting in $648 billion in losses. These losses require that the government step in to provide relief through the Financial Stabilization Bill, or TARP. The recession of 2008 required that the United States and its economy, as well as the government, find a way to rebuild following the recession. To offset financial losses, the federal government moved reserves into the banking system, ultimately bailing out most banks that had lost significant amounts of money due to foreclosures and defaults on loans. President George W. Bush signed the Economic Stimulus Act in 2007 that provided from $600 to $1,200 per individual in the United States to help people recover from job loss as well as financial loss. Short-term interest rates were decreased to near 0%. The goal was to try to stimulate the economy by allowing people to pay back their loans, or if not, refinance and pursue new loans. As the Bush presidency transitioned to the Obama, the economy saw an end to the recession. The combination of stimulus, adjusting fiscal policies, allowed the economy to rebound over the next 5 years following the recession. And as a response to the recession, President Obama signed the Dodd-Frank Act that increased regulations on banks and how they manage the mortgages, preventing the misuse of subprime loans. A major question to be asked during this presentation is that, are we at risk for another recession? We have begun to see that home prices are continuing to climb and have almost met or exceeded prices familiar to that prior to the recession of 2008. The positive of all this is that the United States is at less risk for another recession due to the existing regulations that were put in place to circumvent predatory loaning and the overuse of subprime loans. Additionally, the government is utilizing many different regulators or regulation groups that have a variety of perspectives on the economy, the housing market, and mortgages that all provide valuable insight on the potential of another recession. Having different eyes in different areas allows the economy to maintain its growth without the need for overuse of the predatory loans as mentioned before. Another benefit is that Trump had loosened some restrictions that were created as a result of the Dodd-Frank Act. These loosened restrictions were focused more on smaller banks and smaller communities that weren't able to provide many loans for local businesses due to the increased regulations and red tape required to pursue a loan. The benefit of this is that many local companies can grow within their economy, the local economy, creating additional jobs and revenue for local governments. And as the United States wades through 2021 and the current pandemic, the ability to maintain low interest rate loans has allowed the United States to remain afloat while the government provides support to those displaced from work. Unfortunately, if the United States requires an increase in taxes to offset the spending, the country may be at risk for another recession. It's important to look at the future and provide sound advice to address the potential for fiscal policies to result in another recession. The risk for the United States to go into another recession lies heavily on the policymakers and those that we elect into those positions to ensure that the banks do not take advantage of consumers purchasing a home or businesses pursuing growth. The increasing home value should not be mistaken for growth of the economy if the loans that back them are acquired by risky individuals. Therefore, the use of subprime loans must be monitored for appropriateness. The government must also support lower interest rates to ensure that consumers can pay back loans. There is a financial benefit to increasing interest rates, but there's also the risk that people will default on loans. They must also allow individuals the ability to refinance existing loans to maintain financial stability. And much of the fault of the recession lies in consumers' ability to fully understand interest rates and how they may change after acquiring a mortgage. It's very important that many banks explain the risk associated with taking a mortgage. Lastly, the benefit of financial reform and the use of regulations, monitoring, and education regarding the dangers of poor money management can help both the economy grow and individuals understand the risk associated with different forms of loan. In summary, the Great Recession of 2008 led to one of the worst economic downturns since the Great Depression. Government decreased the regulations on the provision of mortgages, which resulted in bad loans, defaults, and foreclosures. The need to expand the economy ultimately led to the destruction of the economy. The increase in regulations and monitoring of financial institutions can help with preventing a future recession by providing an ability to monitor the misuse of loans and promote the education associated with purchasing a loan. In the United States, home prices continue to increase, and the risk for predatory loans should be thwarted to prevent another housing crash. The way that we can address this is through the regulations, through different fiscal policies that can promote the good use of subprime loans as well as the more conventional loans. For your viewing pleasure, here are the references for today's presentation. Again, my name is Davin Breeden, and I appreciate that you taking the time to learn about the 2008 recession. Have a good day.